We're talking about India and Turkey. Based on a really eye-opening recent webinar by the IDDF Research Foundation over in New Delhi, we are going to unpack the massive, and I mean absolutely massive, strategic potential between these two. We'll look at how their economies actually complement each other, and crucially, those shared security concerns in West Asia, like the Iran crisis, that are basically forcing a total reassessment of how they interact. It's a whole story of misconnections, crazy rapid global disruptions, and literally immense untapped opportunity. Let's get right into it. But real quick, before we really get going, if you could just take a split second to like, share, and subscribe to NewsWala Adda, that would be amazing. Doing that helps us keep bringing you these deep dive explainers on complex geopolitical shifts. Okay, let's jump back in. So, here's the big paradox. You gotta ask yourself, why are two of the world's most vital, rapidly growing G20 economies basically ghosting each other on the global strategic stage? I mean, we are talking about two nations that have incredibly deep historical, cultural, and civilizational links. And yet, despite all those shared roots, their strategic engagement it's shockingly limited. They're like two absolute giants that have somehow managed to become total blind spots to one another. Former Indian ambassador to Turkey, Sanjay Panda, hit the nail on the head. He perfectly described this whole relationship as an enigma. Because despite these deep links that have connected them for centuries, their actual realized potential is pretty much zero. Well, maybe not zero, but completely unrealized. It's this super complex, promising dynamic, but both sides are kind of just standing there scratching their heads, searching for answers on how to actually make it work. And this quote right here, this is fascinating. Turkish scholar Professor Mehmet Özkan frames this mutual omission perfectly. As a major voice at the Turkish National Defense University, he argues that both of these countries consistently underestimate the other's strategic value. He says, India is missing from Turkey's Asia policy, and Turkey is missing from India's West Asia policy. And that right there highlights a massive gap in long-term planning. By keeping this blind spot, they're literally leaving unbelievable strategic and economic value right there on the table. Which brings us to the core issue holding everything back. Let's look at this. On one side, we have the roadblocks, right? These periodic political frictions that are almost always viewed through the prism of third-party issues. Ambassador Panda was really clear about this. Bilateral relations need to be handled on their own merits, not through the lens of what other countries are doing. Because on the flip side, you have these massive strategic convergences. Climate change, energy security, trade routes, regional stability. We've got to stop letting old political friction hijack what could be an incredibly powerful strategic alignment. And listen, the clock is ticking on this. The rapidly shifting sands of West Asia mean India and Turkey literally can't afford to ignore each other anymore. Dr. Omer Anas, the director of research at IDDF, made it clear that the accelerating geopolitical transformations happening across West Asia and Eurasia right now demand total reassessment. They have to start dealing with cold, hard strategic realities instead of just relying on outdated, inherited perceptions. Because these shared regional threats we're talking about, they aren't just, distant political chatter. The ripple effects of the Iran crisis, the developments involving Gaza, disrupted trade corridors, major maritime and energy insecurity, all of this threatens actual state fragmentation in the region. This isn't just abstract diplomacy we're talking about here. This is about the price of the fuel you buy, the safety of global shipping lanes, and the stability of supply chains that directly impact the wallets of everyday people in both India and Turkey. Dr. Omer Anas really brings this reality home. He points out that the Iran crisis and all this surrounding instability have seriously alarmed both New Delhi and Ankara. These security concerns aren't just over there anymore. They have effectively landed right on the doorsteps of both countries. So this evolving, kind of chaotic geopolitical environment, it's presenting a critical opportunity and honestly an absolute necessity for India and Turkey to find common ground and build a real structured dialogue on regional security. Okay, let's shift gears for a second. Moving away from the security threats, let's talk about the money, the economic reality that makes fixing this political distance so absolutely vital. Because when you finally push past the political disagreements, you uncover an absolute treasure trove of untapped economic potential. It's just sitting there, waiting to be activated by a more pragmatic, realistic approach. Former Turkish ambassador to India, Shakir Özkan Torunlar, had this fascinating observation. He said these two massive markets are actually like puzzle pieces that fit perfectly together. They do not compete, they complement each other. But despite that fact, the current volume of bilateral trade is just nowhere near its true potential. We're looking at two absolute economic powerhouses, uniquely positioned to supply exactly what the other needs if they could just get the institutional mechanisms working together. And the blueprint for this economic boom is super clear. Ambassador Tornlar brought up the 2017 visit of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to India. Right after that active engagement, there was a huge spike in business, tourism, and people-to-people contact. It works. By jump-starting bilateral forums, getting the private sector involved, and boosting cooperation across tech, trade, and infrastructure, this economic relationship could absolutely skyrocket. Plus, experts are stressing that we desperately need more academic dialogue. Universities, think tanks, journalists, just talking to each other to clear up the misconceptions currently dragging the relationship down. So how do we actually fix the whole shebang? Well, the experts laid out a consensus roadmap, and it comes down to 3 steps. Step 1, show some strategic maturity. Acknowledge the lowest common denominator to move forward and respect each other's core concerns. Step 2, separate the money from the politics. Make the economic relations highly transactional and pragmatic. And step 3, Professor Özkan was really strong on this one. Let business, let civil society, and let the intellectuals take the wheel, not the politicians. If the political will is there to just get out of the way, the private sector and the people can do the heavy lifting. All right, before we wrap up this explainer, please take just one more quick second to like, share, and subscribe to NewsWala Adda. It seriously helps us out immensely and ensures we can keep bringing you these deep dives into the global relationships that are actively shaping our future. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. As global disruptions keep accelerating, and as these major security threats land right on their doorsteps, will these two giants finally bridge their strategic gap? Or are they just going to let inherited perceptions and third-party politics write their future, leaving them as a strategic blind spot to one another forever? The potential is absolutely undeniable, but the clock on regional stability is ticking. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this geopolitical enigma.
भाई, क्या तुमने आज की ताज़ा और बड़ी न्यूज़ सुनी है? नहीं, मैंने तो नहीं देखी। एक बात बताओ, तुमको हर न्यूज़ सबसे पहले कैसे पता चल जाती है? मैं न्यूज़ वाला अड्डा फॉलो करता हूँ, इसीलिए मुझे हर चीज़ की जानकारी होती है। हाँ साहब, मैंने भी न्यूज़ वाला अड्डा सब्सक्राइब करा हुआ है। अच्छा, तो मैं भी जल्दी से सब्सक्राइब कर लेता हूँ। आप भी जल्द से जल्द न्यूज़ वाला अड्डा सब्सक्राइब करें और सबके साथ शेयर करें।